It is a distinct honor to introduce Imam Yahya Hendi. He serves as the Muslim chaplain at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, and at Georgetown University, where he teaches a very popular course called the Interreligious Encounter. I would like to take that. That sounds really interesting. He also the founder and president. He's also the founder and the president of Clergy Beyond Borders, and the founder and the president of the newly founded organization, Imams for Universe, Dignity, Human Rights, and Dialogue. The Imam Hendi undergraduate education was in Islamic Studies, and his master's and PhD were in comparative religions with a concentration in Christianity, Judaism, comparative religions, and interreligious dialogue and relations. The Imam Hendi was one of the Muslim leaders who met with President Clinton during his presidency. He also met with President Bush in the aftermath of the September 11th tragedy and continued to meet many times during his presidency. A sought-after speaker, the Imam Hendi has presented on a multitude of interfaith and general lectures in the U.S., Asia, Africa, Europe, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, Australia, and the Middle East. He has written numerous publications on many topics, including women in Islam, women and gender relations in Islam, the Second Coming of Messiah, Islam and biomedical ethics, and religion and Islam in the United States. Imam Hendi is sought-after expert on Islam and conflict resolution issues. He believes that with love and education, the world... It's my distinct honor. Please join me in a round of applause for the Imam Yahya Hendi.
Oh, thank you, Rose. I want to thank the hospital and each and every one of you for being here and for giving me this honor. I have to say this, though. To smell this wonderful for someone who has been fasting for almost 7 hours now, no food, no drink, this happens for me. The other confession I have is that I was trained back in 1992 to speak by a Baptist minister from Alabama. He told me back then that the secret of public speaking is that once you take on the microphone, never ever give up on it. So what a challenge today to be told I only have 20 minutes to give my presentation. Well, let's see if I succeed in that challenge. Islam and medical care, Islam and end-of-life issues. I would start with this greeting, Assalamu alaikum. Can we try it all? Assalamu alaikum. Again. Assalamu alaikum. The response is Wa alaikum assalam. Wa alaikum assalam. So we already started the training. Good. This is the greeting that you do to greet any Muslim. But trust me, it makes a difference when you, as a nurse and a doctor or healthcare provider, walk into a patient room or see a Muslim patient and say, Assalamu alaikum. Trust me, it opens doors for you. Because it tells them, the patients, that you know something about them. It tells them that you are familiar with them and that you are sensitive to their needs. It opens doors for you. So that's number one issue. Learn to say Assalamu alaikum. It is really basically similar to how a Jew would greet a Jew. Shalom. The same word even. Shalom. Salam. Or peace be with you. You hear that in a church. And also with you. So it's not really a unique Muslim greeting, though Muslims use it now more than they would say, hi dude, you know, assalamu alaikum is good, it's good. Maybe we need to bring religion back somehow to our lives. So, assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. When Islam talks about medicine, when Muslims write about Islam, biomedical ethics, Islam, and medicine, they always think about these 4 terms. In Islamic biomedical ethics and paradigms, every human being is made of 4 things. Equal importance: mind, brain and thinking, heart, emotions, soul and the spirit, spirituality, flesh, the medium that carries that person. Each and every one of these components of the human being has to be attended to when you do treat a Muslim patient. How do you try to bring peace to the mind? The way you carry out your data, the way you give your decisions, the way you give your diagnosis to the Muslim patient, the way he or she makes sense of them is quite important. So that's what I mean here, talking to the mind. Engaging the mind is also important in the caring for the Muslim patient. The heart, the emotions. How do you deal with that? Do you just come in for a minute and leave? And what about those emotions that are a part of how a Muslim patient is feeling at that very given moment? Spirit, prayer, thinking of God, and what does that mean to them? Flesh, the medium, that's what we all do when we talk about medicine. We focus in many cases only on the medium, on how to give him or her a Tylenol or Advil to take care of their headache. But their headache could be from a problem happening back at home. So how would a doctor engage the patient with his or her life enough to have them open up? Maybe that would be their Advil, to open up to you because they could not open up back at home. This is quite important in Islam, a way of thinking about medicine. A holistic treatment of the patient. I always say that the good doctor or nurse is he who can take more time with the patient and engage them in every way, shape, and form possible. I know it's difficult to do that sometimes when you have 50 or 30 patients to see in 2 or 3 hours. I understand, trust me. But how do you balance it out? A Muslim patient believes in so many things that Jews and Christians believe in, and we would also share some beliefs with Buddhism and Hinduism and other issues. But these are the main issues for Muslims when they think of faith. They believe in God. The Arabic word for God is Allah, but Allah is not a different God from the God of Jews and Christians. If you are a Christian worshipping in an Arabic church in the Arab world, you would not say God, I promise you. You would say Allah. If you are a Jew speaking in Arabic in a synagogue or to a Jewish fellow in Yemen or in Egypt or in Iraq, that's what would you say? You would say Allah. You would not say God. So Allah is only the Arabic word for God. Why would I want you to know this? If you speak to a Muslim patient, use the word Allah. Again, it opens doors for you. That's number one. Number two, it tells them that you know something about them. Number three, you are not compromising on your own belief about God as a Jew, as a Christian. It's only language, not religion, that separates us there. A Muslim may request a copy of the Quran to be available at his bedside. Not that they are offended by the presence of a Bible, a Christian Bible or a Torah. To be a Muslim, actually, you have to believe that God revealed the scriptures to God's chosen messengers, we call them, like Moses, like David, like Jesus, like Isaac, like Solomon. These are prophets and messengers of God. We believe in them, we respect them, we honor them. Day of judgment, life after death. It means a lot for a Muslim patient to be reminded that at the end of the day, we will be meeting with our Lord. The very same belief that we would have in Judaism or in Christianity, especially in Christianity, meeting the Lord or the day of judgment. and God will have His grace on us on that day. The very same idea. 5 pillars of Islam that Muslims have to practice or demonstrate to be Muslims. A declaration of faith. Equal in Judaism to bar mitzvah, equal in Christianity to baptism. This is the rite of passage into Islam. Very important for a nurse to know it, for a doctor to know it. Dying people would want to be reminded of it. So if you have it on a piece of paper, not the word shahada, but the whole testimony of faith, it would be very, very, very helpful. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I bear witness that there is no deity except God, and that Muhammad is only a messenger of God. This is the shahada, and people would want to be reminded of that shahada at bedside. And not only that, Muslims who are critically ill, or even not critically ill, would want to say shahada very often as a form of meditation, as a form of a spiritual exercise to help them cope with their disease or what they are facing. 5 daily prayers, morning, noon, afternoon, sunset, and night prayer. Before the 5 daily prayers, Muslims have to do something called wudu, ablution. A specific wash-up. You wash your hands, your arms, face, you wipe your head, and wash your feet before you pray. There's a philosophy for why that happens. The idea is a cleansing, physically cleansing of the body that sins. You sin with your hand, you sin with your mouth, you sin with your brain. To cleanse your head from the sin it has committed. To cleanse your hands from the sin it has committed. To cleanse your feet from the sins it had committed. This is the whole idea of washing. But for you now in the medical field, what about a patient who might be wrapped up around his arm or a neck or head or leg or foot? Well, you do as much of it as you can. So you don't need to wash up. You can only wipe on that piece of fabric or whatever you use. If you cannot even wipe or put any kind of water on that surface, then you don't. You do of it as much as you can. You need to keep that in mind, because some Muslim patients say, I need to do the washing. You say, no, the Imam said you don't need to do it. If it contributes to some kind of medical discomfort or if it delays your treatment, then you can just quit it. Don't worry about it. But people who are able to do wudu, to make wudu, you might need to assist them. So a patient in your room might ask you to take him or her to the bathroom to help them stand on their feet to do the wudu. The wudu would take, again, 2 to 5 minutes. It depends on who is doing it and how fast they are in it. But you need to stand with them to help them wash their hands, wash their feet, wash their faces and wipe their head. So that could be a question for you, could be a request from the nurse to do. Prayer also requires prostration and kneeling. Well, you can't always do that. If your medical condition allows you to do the prostration and kneeling, that's what you do. If you cannot, then the tradition says you might not be able to have your knees kneel, your head can kneel, or your heart can kneel to God. So close your eyes, imagine yourself in that position of kneeling. Imagine yourself in that position of prostrating before God. So you do of it as much as you can. So the Muslim patient might ask you to come into the room, raise the bed little bit, put it back a little bit, based on how much they can do and how much you think they can do. So there is a big room, an open room in that regard. The prayer requires a direction to Mecca. We pray towards Mecca because we believe that's a house that was built for the worship of God by Abraham, the father of monotheism. So we like to remember Abraham 5 times a day. So you need to know where Mecca is from Frederick Memorial Hospital, my friends. I was in Singapore, in Thailand last year for a program, and I ended up hurting my back at the hotel. When I ended up at the hospital, in every hospital room, they have a direction to Mecca from there, because they get so many Muslim patients. It is in there on the window. Many people don't know what it is, but Muslims know what it is. You see, so that will be very helpful. Or what about a campus? Or now, if you have an iPad or an iPhone, there's an electronic campus in there that directs you towards Mecca. But as a nurse, as a doctor, as a healthcare provider, keep that in mind. That might be the request of the Muslim patient. Where is Mecca? Mecca is northeast. That's what you need to do. As a hospital, it's good to keep that available. Some people like to pray on a prayer rug, but they don't need to do that. Any clean sheet could help. But a prayer rug will be very helpful. And you can buy them from internet. I can help you do that. I'm not making any money. I trust you. Zakat, to share some of your wealth with the poor and with the needy. We're not going to talk about that now. Ramadan, to fast in the month of Ramadan, like the month we are in. Fasting, you abstain from food from dawn to sunset. And you don't drink whatsoever. You don't eat whatsoever. Of course, there are exemptions to the rule. If you are on medication, or if you are sick, if you vomit too much, things like this may exempt you from fasting. Some people are so stubborn, trust me, they want to fast no matter what. You, the doctor, decide, really, if that fasting is okay for him or her. Again, I wish I had the time. I try not to be that Baptist minister today, although I love Baptists. They are my wonderful brothers and sisters. Okay, things you need to know. Clergy and religious leaders in Islam have different titles. Some people call them imam. Some people call them sheikh. Some people call them scholar. Some people call them mullah or maulana or ayatollah. So different cultures call the clergy different titles. Imam, sheikh, sheikh in the Arab world. Imam in the West, really. Mullah, Maulana, most likely in India, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh. Ayatollah in Iran, southern Lebanon. So people have these names that refer to the same thing, basically. Spiritual practices within medicine, the concept of dhikr, meditation, does exist in Islam. It helps people relax. You can download it on your iPad. I would ask the hospital to have CDs on Islamic meditation, called in Arabic dhikr, songs with the music that help people relax. And you might be asked of it, have a CD of that kind in your department. So if a Muslim patient wants to relax, you give him or her that CD. Or download it on their computer in their room. I have been hospitalized there so many times, so I know. So download it on their computer, they can hear it. I wish there was enough time to talk about everything here. Things to keep in mind. Islam upholds the sanctity of life and that it should be preserved and not destroyed. Islam deplores suicide and cautions one from committing murder. Since the body is a gift and trust from God, it must be protected, whether life or death. It must be kept cleaned with specific rituals that Muslims do. Something called the ghusl. After you have an intimate relationship with your spouse, you end up in a mandatory ghusl. You have to wash up your body after an intimate relationship. Before you eat, after you eat, you have to wash your hands. The specific rituals of how you do that. Seeking cure for medicine is a requirement in Islam. It's not a matter of choice. You have to seek a treatment for your disease if treatment is available. Upon death, or with the dying Muslim patient, he may ask again for the recitation of the Shahada. I told you about it earlier. It's good to have a copy of it in your department. The presence of a family member is very helpful at that moment. Dying people may ask to be directed towards Mecca. It's very important, and therefore you need to be able to redirect the bed, not necessarily the whole body, or it could be the body, but the bed in this case, towards northeast. When the person dies, you close the eyes and you read what's called the first chapter of the Quran, Al-Fatiha. I don't have it here because this is a short version of my presentation, by the way. Then people are taken after that for what's called janaza. Janaza is usually offered at the mosque, the prayer service, before he or she is taken to the cemetery. Islamic medical ethics. If anyone has saved a life, it would be as if he has saved the life of the whole world. Very important in Islamic medical ethics. That's what you do, guys. You are the best because you save the human lives. Necessity overrides prohibition. Necessity overrides prohibition. In Islam, we don't drink alcohol. And we don't eat food with alcoholic ingredient. And we use medicine that does not have alcohol in it. Well, what about if the only medicine available has some kind of pork product in it? And that's the only medicine available. It takes us to this rule. Necessity overrides prohibition. What matters in Islam is to keep that body alive, to protect it from any form of destruction. Harm should not be removed by causing another equivalent harm or bigger harm, especially if you do a medical a transplant or an organ donation. That rule has to be kept in mind. Removing harm has priority over bringing benefit. Harm is removed as needed. Now, specific issues to conclude with, end-of-life issues. Prolonging life. Muslim physicians are ordained to help alleviate suffering, not encouraged to artificially prolong the misery in a vegetative state. I'll talk about that in a second more. The purpose of extraordinary medical intervention is to maintain the process of life, not to avoid or postpone death. Mercy killing and physicians-assisted suicide are prohibited. Physicians may not actively contribute to the death of a patient. That's what Islam says. Death is defined when the soul is separated from the body, once both the heart and the brain become dysfunctional. Again, the person is considered dead in Islam when the soul departs from the body. The soul departs the body, according to Islam, biomedical ethics, when both the brain and the heart are becoming dysfunctional. When both the heart and the brain becoming dysfunctional, not only one of them. In brain death, the Muslim law or Sharia Council of Great Britain resolved that the medical profession is the proper authority to define signs of death. The current medical knowledge considers brain stem death to be a proper definition of death. The Council accepts brain stem death as constituting the end of life. So it used to be that the heart and the brain have to be dead. According to the Muslim Council of Europe, if the brain is dead, the person is dead, regardless of the heart. So you have here a cultural difference in terms of how Muslims may define death, or how it used to be vis-a-vis how it is now. So cultures are different, but there are also different interpretations of the law. And you will see that as you deal with Muslim patients. Although many scholars of Islam limit their approval to removing machines only on those declared brain dead, some other scholars and medical Muslim professionals have a different view. That is to say, you keep it on no matter what, till you absolutely know that the machine is absolutely useless. Can life support or medical treatment be stopped if the support is determined to be useless? Then with the collective decision of medical experts, family members, and religious scholars, it would be permissible to switch off life support. Again, you need to have a few people available there. Medical professionals, family members, religious scholar could also help. Organ transplant is allowed in Islam with specific conditions. For the sake of time, I need to move faster. The specific conditions of what makes organ donation acceptable in Islam. for time, but you have all of that in your presentation, in the presentations you have or the handouts. Autopsy in Islam is allowed for criminal investigations and or for training for doctors. Make it very simple. Birth control in Islam is allowed. So let me go over this very briefly. Birth control is permitted if the method has no unpleasant effects on either spouse and if the method does not lead to a permanent sterilization. Both spouses are to agree and consent in matters of birth control. Technical reproduction only allowed if it is the product of an intact marriage and occurs during the lifespan of the marriage. Artificial insemination and fertilization are allowed if the husband's sperm and the wife's ovum and uterus are used only. Surrogate motherhood is prohibited according to Islamic biomedical ethics. Abortion in Islam is allowed within the 120 days into pregnancy. Basically, the mother decides whether she wants to continue with that pregnancy or not for no reason. After 120 days, it would require, or it will be required only if it adds to the danger of the life of the mother. That's very briefly. Power of attorney and writing a will. In Islam, it is urged for every Muslim to write his or her will before he or she dies. And online, you can download what is called the Muslim will. And people usually sign it. And it's available in so many hospitals across the country as well. Muslim needs, they will ask for specific things. They might need a copy of the Quran. They might need a calendar of the prayer times. They might ask for a prayer rug, as I said earlier. Specific questions to conclude with. Final questions and answers. What does Islam say about abortion and unwanted pregnancies? I answered earlier. Within 120 days, it's allowed. After that, it has to be because of life danger on the mother. What is the Islamic ruling on using alcohol for medical purposes? It's allowed if there's no alternative. What determines the death of a human being according to Islam? Most scholars would say the dysfunctionality of the brain and the heart, not one of them only, while others suggest only the brain death or dysfunctionality. Assisted suicide is not allowed. The using of contraceptions. Using contraception is allowed as a means to organize the pregnancies and not limiting its number thereafter. My email. Thank you. Now we have a wonderful panel of wonderful doctors, all of whom work here at the hospital. You might already know some of them. Dr. Sayyid Haq, who is the chief of medicine here and has been here for 10 years. God help the hospital. He's a wonderful man and internist. Dr. Asma Ali, who just joined the hospital here, I believe like a month from now, away. July 7th, so it's very, in Hebrew, Khadash, in Arabic, noon. So welcome to the hospital. She is an OBGYN specialist. And finally is our wonderful doctor, Dr. Shahid Rafiq, who is a stroke specialist and the Frederick Memorial Hospital stroke director and urologist, and been here for 5 years. So we have a wonderful panel to also answer some of the questions that you have for them. Think about your questions, and we'll come back to you in 10 minutes. Meanwhile, I have specific questions to ask them. Dr. Shahid, a question for you. How does culture influence the way patients and families discuss medical information and make medical decisions?
Yeah, I have some experience also, not only here in United States, but before that, when I was in South Africa. I don't think this is religious, but cultural. I think in East, subcontinent, India, in Africa, non-Muslim Africa, South Africa, there is a tendency, a request from the children that our grandma or mother is, recently diagnosed with lung cancer. Can you please not tell her? So when I came here, I mean, we had to pass the ethical part in our exam, and I know that we cannot withhold any information from the patient. So that I see is a conflict or dilemma, not only here but other countries as well. I think our guideline says that we cannot withhold any information. We have to disclose all the diagnoses and the workup to the patient. But there is a middle ground, and that is in the ethical books as well, that you can ask the patient how much you want to know, how much information you need. And if they say, I don't want to know anything, and then you can withhold that information. But otherwise, I would say that we have to tell our patients.
Thank you. Doctor, yes.
Hey, hi, assalamu alaikum. I'll say assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. A lot of guys know me, and Manny, I wish this was the same attendance in our Department of Medicine meeting. Too bad. Anyway, I just want to add a few things, because you have to understand the educational background of the people coming, especially in Islam or in Muslims. The rate of education in elderly is not that as high as in our younger generation or my generation. So the decision making was based on the guy who knows the best in the family. So the doctors or that person, whether a male or a female, who had the more education, would most of the time make the decision for the grandma or the grandpa or anybody else. So it is, as Dr. Rafiq said, it's a cultural thing. It's not really a religious thing.
Thank you. Dr. Asma Ali, what effect does religious practice have upon the birth of a child? Birth attendance, breastfeeding, and other issues like that.
Well, Muslim women, they prefer to have all female birth attendants. This goes for somebody who's not Muslim, and they would want women providers, or even as sensitive as the pediatrician or the anesthesiologist who's going to put the epidural in. So you might see that come up, that they will request for a women provider. I mean, we understand as Muslims that sometimes our request is not granted, and it depends on the medical staffing. If that's an available option, then yeah, we could provide that for our female patients. But if not, then we try our best. Also, to understand one of the cultural things is as far as the husband. Sometimes people think, oh, he's not involved. He's sitting in the corner, like he's just not really being there with her. But it might be an uncomfortable situation for him. He's not used to being around all females, and her wife being exposed and things like that. So just understand that. As far as breastfeeding, Islam encourages women to breastfeed for up to 2 years. So it's definitely encouraged quite a bit.
Yes, you can. Now we know who the troublemaker is.
No, but we have come to this country, and Americans believe in statistics and data, and this is what the data is. In a city where I was born, Karachi, the population of that time was 12 million people. In the 12 million people city, there was only two male GYN, not OB, GYN doctors. So you can imagine the importance of that thing. I just wanted to put that in perspective.
Dr. Wasim, now I'll come to you. You took all of your time, so you must not have any time anymore.
I'll be short.
Okay. What effect does religious practice have upon the termination of life? I mentioned that earlier in my presentation, but what do you have to add as a doctor? what measures are to be taken to prolong life, view of organ donation, all of this stuff. What kind of practices?
I speak better when I stand up. I think, as you explained in your presentation, it's almost the same. Because as a primary care doctor, I have to do this almost at least once a week, about end of life and advance directive and living will and all that. Initially, I did not understand these things myself because I came from a society and a culture where this was never discussed. In a culture, if you go to Karachi, let's say, I'll take Karachi as a city of example because I grew up there. It is like the New York of Pakistan. You know, it's very cosmopolitan, very commercial, and the education rate is pretty high. I mean, I would say that the education rate in Karachi would be like 70, 80%, maybe more, compared to the rest of the country where the education rate is only 34% or 35%. Even in those educational, highly educated people, these things are not very clear. But in the United States, the advance directive, as you mentioned, I don't think there is any law that prevents in Islam somebody to have a living will and advance directive. And as physicians, we treat them equally without any bias.
So advance directive will be a part of the will that the Muslim patient has to have. Yeah.
That is a religion thing. But as a physician myself, my 60% of our patients are above the age of 75. Almost 80% of them, they have advance directive. We have discussed this. And this is one of the board exam questions, by the way, that when will you discuss about advanced directives and living will with your patient? And they give you first visit, second visit, third visit, fourth visit. The answer is first visit. First visit we discuss the living will. So as far as a physician is concerned, I do not see any difference in talking about advanced directive living will with a Muslim or a non-Muslim, because I do not see anything in Islam. If you have something else to add,
that's it. Yeah, thank you. Dr. Shahid, a very brief question. You know, like in a Christianity, you know, a Methodist may give you a different answer from a Catholic on like issue of abortion, or a Jew, Orthodox vis-a-vis a Reformed Jew. In Islam, is there something like that? So can there be different interpretations within the Muslim culture on specific issues and approaches to medical practices?
I think you'll be the better person to answer that question. But I am not aware of, you know, we have some, you know, groups in Islam, and most people know about Shia and Sunni. But I am not aware of any such. But I would add that I think I liked all of your presentation, a wonderful presentation, but I like that necessity is the overriding factor in above all prohibition. So I think abortion also comes under that.
Yeah, I mentioned a few differences. In the Shia Muslim community, when they pray on a stone. They put their forehead on a stone. They don't pray to a stone, but for them it's closer to nature to pray on a piece of stone. And I have seen that in some hospitals in Detroit, where the chaplain may have pieces of stone flattened, and a Shia Muslim may ask for that. In many cases, he would not or she would not ask because they have it with them. But that could be something. I spoke earlier about abortion, where in some Muslim cultures, abortion is absolutely no from the moment of conception. In the majority of Muslim societies, when you ask educators about the religious stand, they will tell you what I told you about 120 days vis-a-vis after 120 days. Little differences in there. The last thing I would say is that Muslims are like every other religious community. We're shaped by our cultures and our knowledge of life and our definition of who we are and who we are not. It's shaped by what we think and what we want to think of ourselves. And some Muslims come from Muslim background, but they're not the practicing Muslim. And therefore they don't care about any of this stuff. You know, one of the slides there is about gender issues, you know, interaction. You know, in some Muslim cultures, the man and the woman who are not related, like in marriage, would not shake hands. Well, in some cultures, that does not exist, that whole idea of non-shaking hand. So you need to be sensitive to that, to those gender-sensitive relations, if you will. So what would you do if you are a male doctor or nurse, you walk in to talk to a Muslim patient from the opposite gender? You can just say, hi, how are you doing, or assalamu alaikum. And if you really think that's good to shake the hand, ask, do you shake hand? I met Dr. Asma just for the first time almost an hour ago. I asked her the same question, do you shake hand? Yes, I do. I extended my hand out of respect for her. So these are issues that might be different from person to person, culture to culture. So not every Muslim thinks that way. Not every Muslim woman covers. Not every Muslim does not cover. You know, people are different like every other religious community. Asma, Dr. Asma, I have the last question for you, maybe the most serious one. You are a Muslim woman. You cover your head, so you are easily noticeable. You walk around. Anything you have to say about, what is that a form of danger? Is that a good thing? What has been your experience with that? What do you say about your, have you ever been to a patient's room and he said, well, no, I don't want to see you. Something like that. Talk about your...
No, actually, it's an easy question. In my experience, I've been trained in Philadelphia primarily. I've been to hospitals around there. I've been to hospital in Oklahoma, and I've been here for a month. And I've had really good experiences, both from the patient side and also the medical staff. The patients, especially like in the office, you know, I had one patient that came in, she was Filipino, and she went through, her husband had died 3 years ago. She moved to this country. Her two sons were missing their father. And she was having all these issues. She came in for bleeding irregularities, but when I actually talked to her, it was more than that. She said, you know, in our culture, we don't even, we don't have any relations with a man besides our husband. So she was feeling all guilty that she met this new guy. So here I was sitting there, and she kind of related to me. She saw me as a religious person, and she opened up, and she told me what she was feeling, and I kind of reassured her. So I actually see this as a strong point when I'm meeting with the patients. As far as medical staff, everybody has been great. Every hospital that I've been to, especially issues come up with the OR, sterility. I do scrub, I do cases, I do hysterectomies, and hopefully I'll be working on the robot at some point in a year or two. So the point is that, you know, everybody's very respectful, and if there is something that I need, for instance, I wear the bearded cap, I wear two of them, one covering my neck and one covering my head, and everybody's very helpful. They'll, you know, go try to find it, go in the men's locker room and get it for me. So it's actually been a great experience.
Thank you, and welcome to Frederick, by the way. Okay, the floor is yours, the nurses, the doctors, the health providers.
What kind of food is not allowed in the Muslim diet? Or are there any restrictions?
Well, not like in the Jewish community, you might be referring to that, but in the kosher culture, you don't eat shellfish. In Islam, you do not eat anything that is mixed with pork. You do not eat the meat of tigers. But beside this, the meat has to be slaughtered in a specific way, prepared in a specific way, and cleaned from blood. That's it. In the culture here, we have something called halal certified food with a specific symbol on it. It says halal with it in a specific way. Most hospitals now are familiar with that and order that type of meat for their Muslim patients. But the most important thing, it should not have pork or any pork product. Number two, should not have alcohol in it. Again, back to a difference in the culture. Some people believe alcohol is okay because once you cook it, it evaporates and it loses its alcoholic characteristic to it. I would say avoid any type of food that has alcohol in it, but you don't want to get into trouble with a Muslim patient saying, why did you have any alcohol in it? I hope that answered the question. Yes? To anyone, by the way. Let me just, thank you for interrupt you for the sake of the training. She said, when we come across an Islam patient, this is in language. We say, my religion is Islam. I am a Muslim. He is a Muslim. So you would say here, when we come across a Muslim patient, not an Islamic patient. Islam would define theology. Muslim would define the culture of Muslim. Good? Thank you. Sure.
I'm curious about the Muslim view of particularly serious mental illness, how it's viewed, and to what extent treatment is sought for it.
Well, from the theology perspective, it is considered an illness that has to be treated. Again, I said in one of my slides, the belief in Islam is that every disease has a cure. The challenge of human beings is to find that cure and seek it. And we have to seek it if it's there. So it is an actual illness from the theology perspective. It has to be solved, it has to be treated, and one has to seek it. I hope that answers your question. Now, this would lead me to another thing, because mental health was sometimes connected within the medical community to suicide. In the Jewish community, in the Christian community, in the Muslim community, traditionally, we used to think that if you commit suicide, you would not receive religious rites in the church, in the synagogue, or in the mosque, and you cannot be buried in accordance with any of these faith communities. Traditionally, this was the teachings. In the last 20 years, it has changed within the Jewish community, within the Christian community, and within the Muslim community, where suicide now could be a natural outborn baby of an actual mental health issue. And therefore, now we do religious rites for the deceased, and we bury them in a Muslim cemetery, like in a Catholic service or in a Jewish community. Because we have evolved, as all of us said, I think. What matters is how to protect that body, how to promote its preservation and its health. We have to do everything within our means to protect it. Now, this is different from suicide bombing. Suicide bombing is not a mental health issue. It's a decision made by a person considered in Islam sinful, legally a crime. Within the Islamic, within the Islamic parameters of thinking, suicide bombing is an actual sin and illegal. Different from something that comes out of a mental health with. To really thank ABI and the Advisory Council, the Diversity Advisory Council for all they did. Because ABI, and she had a team of, what is your team working with you? So stand up and let us recognize their work, please.